And it looks like we have the Fenton House joining us as well. So, okay, well, welcome to today's version of the Yamhill County Leaders Roundtable. There are a lot of things that have happened in the last week or since Friday, and I'd love to begin with maybe a federal update. But before we do that, I'll do announcement or announce who's on this call. There's Mayor Beth Wytoski from the City of Dayton. There's Joya Goodrum from the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. There's Al Bannon as a representative of Suzanne Bonamici, our U.S. representative from Congressional District 1. There's Senator Arnie Roblan. Hello, welcome again. And there's Commissioner Rick Olson from Yamhill County. And I'm Commissioner Casey Kula from Yamhill County. So I would love to get started with a federal...
It's Mary Starrett. Just wanted to let you know I'm on the call.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Starrett, for joining us today. We're going to start with a federal update from Al in Congresswoman Bonamici's office. And it sounds like there's a beginning by having some questions for her. So Joya, did you have a question for Al?
Maybe you're muted, Joya.
She also disappeared. Oh,
sorry, I stepped away for a moment.
Of course.
And yes, I will have questions. Thank you. I apologize. I was in the kitchen and I had to walk back over. My apologies. Thank you.
That's okay. I'll say I don't have much of an update right now. Things are moving forward with the next package, but we're not expecting a vote until early May. So there are lots of conversations around what's going to be included in that. And I'm, as always, still looking to hear what folks are identifying as priorities. We did hear that the employment department is moving forward this week with folks who are self-employed. So if you fall into that category, now is a great time to submit your application. And I had one other thing that I can't remember. So Joy, if you want to ask your question, I'm going to check my email list while the PPP funds that were released last week are moving forward this week. So we've been hearing good things. It sounds like the rollout is a little bit smoother this time than last time, but if you're having any hearing from folks about individual concerns that they're having connecting with their banks or accessing the program, please reach out and we will connect them with the caseworker to help with that along.
Great. Joya, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes. Okay, so I'm hearing that there are some really big businesses that received some of the funds, that they're returning those funds. And I wondered if there was any talk about, would those funds go back into the system so that small businesses that were not given that opportunity the first round will be able to access some of those funds? Like, I think the Lakers said they were going to give back their money, and Potbellies I'd heard was giving back their money. And so I just wondered where we were with that. And do we see SBA giving any more loans out? You know, they were doing the $10,000. Do we see that coming back anytime soon? Thank you.
Yeah, Joya, that's a really interesting question. I've heard the same thing about some of those bigger companies returning their money, and I haven't heard anything specifically about what's going to happen with those funds. I don't know. I'm going to look into that, and I'll follow up with you. I'll follow up with you offline, but I think, Commissioner Kula, that may be something that we might want to address next meeting, because I'm sure a lot of folks will have that same question.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Al. I so appreciate you and everything you're doing. Thanks.
Of course. Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions? Awesome. All right. Great. That's good. That means we're in okay shape. You're muted, Commissioner Kula.
It's true. You know, the computer told me that too. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go to a state update from Senator Roblan. And a lot has happened, but a lot remains to happen. So what do you have to tell people today?
Yeah, so, you know, last week we had our emergency board put out $32 million. We talked a little bit about that last week, and trying to fill in the gaps between what the federal government is putting out there and what we know are problems. And some of that, as I think Representative Gomberg explained, had to do with workers who pay into unemployment but don't receive it because they are not here in a status that allows them as an immigrant to get into the research into those services, even though they've paid into it. So we've done a few of those things to try to make sure that all Oregonians who are working here and doing things here can figure out how to get through this stay-at-home phase. We are starting to have bigger and bigger conversations about what it looks like to open up. The governor has put out and gotten clearer on what her expectations are around that, as has the federal government. I think the Coastal Caucus started hearing things from our northern counties and our southern counties. And so we decided that it would be time to start convening another round with all of our county commissioners. So we did that last week on Friday. We also had all of the state parks, the federal forest people, the federal parks people, all of the federal agencies that have campsites and other things up and down the coast to be a part of that conversation. And in trying to figure out, all of them need to know how to work together, because this can't be something that is haphazardly done, or it will create the problems that happened when spring break took place in the North Coast and all of the visitors came from Washington and Portland to the coast and ate everything that was in all the stores and brought the disease for the first time to those counties. So we want to do it right, but we do understand that people are getting a little bit tired of being in their homes. And because we closed most of the beaches and the parks, it's hard to get to the beaches. The beaches weren't closed, but it was hard to get to them without going through people's private property and other things, which created some conflict with people. So each of the counties had gone about that in a slightly different way. The Douglas County commissioners wrote a letter asking to open up soon. They were trying to get opened up by this week. The Curry County and the Coos County people signed on to the letter with a different understanding. Their understanding was when they were ready, if they met all those criteria that the governor had in place, and they wanted to do it in a staggered way as well. In talking to federal parks, they don't have the PPE nor the equipment to clean their restrooms and do their stuff. So they're a ways away, as they said, from actually being able to open up like the dunes down south or some of these other places to be ready for people. They're not at this point really ready for that, because all of their resources have gone to the medical emergency as opposed to when they were closed down. The state parks has a similar issue. They are not intending to open up any of their spaces for camping. They would have an easy start by opening up the day use of their parks. And they want to coordinate that with the counties. The North counties passed new ordinances that said they were going till the end of May with respect to closing the hotels and the bed and breakfast and all those other kinds of things. And so we heard from that, and that was also true of Clatsop County. So there's clearly a distinction between the others about their proximity to large groups of people who would come and visit. Down in the South Coast, not a lot of people can get to Curry. Half the time you have to go through California to get there. And in Coos County, we have Roseburg that comes over and some others, but if the dunes aren't open, that's kind of the big recreation place for a lot of them. So just getting to the beach, we're looking at if there's a way, how do we open up for locals first and get a sense of what that looks like, and how are the ingredients we need for an opening there? Do they have the food and all the other kinds of things that people are going to want? Do the fast food places, can they handle a crowd coming when there's nobody inside the building yet? They haven't figured out about restaurants. They're having those conversations. And as you know, the governor has a number of subgroups working out of the economic group that I'm on. And we have also the regional economic groups. We're meeting one this afternoon, a little later, for the North Coast. So all of that stuff is kind of coming together. Businesses are starting to identify the kinds of needs they have. If I'm going to have retail, do I need to have plexiglass in front of each of the people that's selling it? Do I have masks at least? And do I require other people to wear masks if they come into the building? All of those questions are still waiting for answers from the governor. So we hope to have some answers there. We are trying to open up our medical facilities and our clinics. I had a couple talks with clinics and hospitals. They're in pretty tough shape. Most of the clinics are down 25 to 30%. They're worried about losing on the coast, and I would assume that's probably true up there. Losing some of their practitioners. They don't know where they might go, but it's very frustrating when you get a team all together and then now you have to furlough parts of that team. So figuring out how to get back is something that's important. So I had a call into the governor's office to say, insurance companies are collecting premiums but not having to pay right now very much. A few of those companies have turned around and given money back to their policyholders. There's a part of me that thinks that those same people should maybe have a conversation with looking at their past history with these clinics and these other places and say, we aren't getting you're not sending in all the bills, but we're going to send you some money to keep you afloat and make sure that providers are there when people do start coming back, because insurance companies need the providers just as bad as us, the people who are getting the providers do. So having some conversations about how do we do some of the stuff to even out the stuff. Got a note from OHSU that they're in really tough shape. They're going to start furloughing. They anticipate being $1 billion down by the end of July or August. So those are really big issues when you're in a pandemic and you need the best of your medical professionals at the time you need them. Not needing them before that is creating some real hardships, and we need to figure what that looks like. Still no sense as to when we will have a special session. That will come up, I think, after we've had the forecast that comes up here in May. And so that's kind of what's happening at the state level right now. There are a lot of meetings going on, a lot of people invested in trying to figure out what's the safe, smart way to reopen across the state and regionally and however that's going to be. So that's what I've got for you.
Absolutely. Are there questions for Senator Roblan? I have some, but I'm happy to wait.
I guess it's you.
All right. Okay, so the first question would be, any sense of the governor and the 1.6 billion, the portion that in theory is allocated to cities and counties? Do you have any sense of, the last I heard their conversation was, well, we don't know what the restrictions are around sending those to cities and counties.
That's still a problem. I still don't think that they clearly understand. A lot of it is very open-ended. So the other part is that a fairly big portion is going to go to those cities and counties that have over 500,000, and that money goes to them directly. It's out of the 1.6 billion. So we have to know what that is first, so we know how much we actually have left in the state's coffers. I think the emergency board made it clear to the governor that we think, instead of loans, which was a conversation that we had, going to those rural hospitals and those other places to keep them afloat, we need to have grants coming from some of that money. So there was a feeling that we should at least put aside from that a couple $100 million to make sure that our healthcare system is taken care of in some of those flexible spending monies. So that, plus some of the hospitals are receiving money now. They got some PPP money and some others, and we need to make sure we know all of those different ramifications so that we get money to the right places. So again, it's been much more difficult, I think, to figure out the 46 streams of money that are coming to us, what goes with each one of them. So
Okay, thank you.
More.
And I believe I at least got an email from, I think, from Fritz Graham in Senator Wyden's office about 104 million that was coming to hospitals in Oregon. Al, do you have more information, or does Senator Roblan have more information on that?
I don't have more. I know that they have some money directly going to hospitals, but I do not know exactly how that's getting distributed.
I don't either, Commissioner Kula, but I can look into that and see if we have more information.
Okay, I believe it was from the COVID 3.5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
Let me check. I'll look right now and see if I can come up with it.
Okay, considering I seem to recall hearing from Senator Boquist that hospitals were asking for 200 million.
Right.
It's a good start, right? Especially since they have a date of May 4th for beginning to resume non-urgent medical procedures.
Correct. Yep.
I have two questions to follow on. If we could clarify for that hospital monies, if there is going to be, and I know we don't know a lot about these monies, but if there's going to be prioritization for rural or unaffiliated hospitals, if there's going to be any sort of a distinction there. And then I have, among very official conversations, I've heard two dates for non-essential medical services, May 1st or May 4th.
Yeah, and I think that they have to be kind of ready. My original thing was May 1st. I think they've gone to May 4th more clearly lately. One of the interesting things we heard recently was that the big hospital chains have been able to start getting their regular streams of PPE and other equipment kind of coming again. They order and they actually get stuff on their orders now, which wasn't happening before. And that many of the small independent hospitals had their own methods of getting it, and we're starting to get some of theirs filled too. So we're starting to feel better about that, because that's one of the important things that has to happen to get these other things opened up. But exactly how it's going to be distributed, I have not heard to this point. Exactly where it's going to go. And I think that's one of the reasons why the emergency board said, keep some of that discretionary money you have that's come into the state already available, so that we can backfill the other kind of stuff. Because I think Boquist was correct in the 200 million. And I don't know if that was enough completely, but it was the kind of place where we really needed to get started and get them going.
Thank you, Senator.
Other questions for Senator Roblan?
This isn't, an incredibly urgent question necessarily, but I'm curious about the discussion related specifically to veterinarian clinics. We tend to see a really big spike in kitten populations and unwanted kitty pregnancies. And I'm really, I know that that's not super high on the totem pole, but it does become a municipal thing where we've got to donate money to spay and neuter clinics to take care of issues, and we have big populations, and seniors tend to feed them at disproportionate rates when they can't afford to. And I know we're not looking to have vet clinics necessarily operating at their full capacity right away, but I'm curious about just being able to restore spay and neuter capability in order to prevent a big surge in those unwanted kitty litters.
So my understanding is that most of them, at least in the South Coast, never closed. So we've taken our dog in twice. They meet us at the outside and take the dog in, and we don't go in. But and they apparently have enough PPE for the surgery stuff, which is the only time they really have to have it. So I think they're in reasonably good shape. Now we did have a situation where a dog now has transmitted the disease in a family, so they've got to be careful. But there's I think that for the most part they are capable of doing those kinds of things. The other thing I
wonder if I can interject a minute, if
Sure.
there's some form of communication we can have to clarify that, because that is not what's happening in a lot of our local vets. They are mostly saying that they do not have PPE equipment and therefore cannot perform surgeries. And they also understand the order that spay and neuter is routine and therefore not essential. And so I've heard from several people that vet clinics here are not performing those operations.
I'll try to get a clarification, because the biggest issue with the governor is she has not close down things that if they can keep the distancing and they can do other kinds of things and they have the equipment to do it, she has not put a general order closing everything down. So I will check around and see if there is an edict out there with regard to that. Okay. The other thing, since Mayor Wytoski was talking, I reminded myself that we got 2 or 3 clarifying emails over education this weekend. The big ones were from the university systems, both private and public in the area, saying they understand about the pass fail. It will not be a problem for kids getting into college. It will not be a problem for us looking at transcripts or anything else. Most of the seniors who applied early were admitted based on their previous semesters anyway, really through the junior year. And they wanted to put a lot of parents at ease that this was not going to be a hardship for them, that the schools were doing what they needed to do to work with their graduating seniors, and they should take a deep breath, and those kids need to get as prepared as they possibly can, because we don't know what it's going to look like when they go to school next year. But the reality is the grading system that was put in place is not going to be a handicap for them. I was appreciative to get those emails.
Yeah, that was a really big relief for a lot of my students and their parents. I appreciated that clarification as well.
Senator Roblan and Mayor Wytoski. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to go back to the spay-neuter question, because we have a low-cost spay-neuter clinic in McMinnville that has not been able to operate. And as you know, we're in kitten season, and this is causing some significant issues because really, truly, this problem is now going to be compounded. So our understanding, as Mayor Wytoski said, is that the clinics have been closed for what they're considering non-essential. So it's basically for emergency procedures and for critical and urgent care. But as far as the routine spay neuter, that has not been allowed to go forward, and that includes our spay neuter clinic. So I've been trying to get clarification on this for the last week, and I've not gotten anywhere, but I do know that it is of concern in our community because we do have such a facility.
I will put that call into the governor's office to see if they can get it clarified.
Thank you.
And again, hopefully they can talk back to their previous providers of that equipment and see if they can start getting some now, because it sounds like those things are opening up across the country as well. So I will find out and see if I can get an answer for you by tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Senator Roblan. And I believe that SEDCOR's PPE exchange should be up and running. Yesterday, it was not yet. It wasn't live, but so that'll be a good resource for folks, at least in our area. Yeah. Joya, did you have a question? Okay, great.
I'm good. It was the same comment that Commissioner Sterrett had. Thank you.
Great. There's a lot of kitten concerns here.
Yeah.
But I think it is really important. I want to recognize that it is really important to get those clarifications about what is open, what has been ordered closed, and what has been closed just out of the fact that they don't have their right personal protective equipment. Yeah.
I do have a follow-on question about the grading system.
Yes.
And I had texted it to Senator Roblan, but is there a timeline for the pass-fail acceptance by colleges and universities? If school is affected next year, and I'm not saying that it will be, but if it is, that means even incoming freshmen would likely have a period of pass-fail on their transcripts that could affect college acceptances 4 to 5 years from now. So are we being mindful? Is it an open time frame, or are we actually specifying that these grades will be considered admissible for colleges and universities through 2026?
My understanding is that the most of the stuff we got back really had to do with this graduating class for next. There is an assumption on my part, and I know that it will get clarified as time goes on, that those grades that juniors and freshmen and sophomores are now receiving, most of which will be pass-fail, the credits will be included in the requirements that they need to get into college, but it will affect their GPA. In fact, well, it doesn't really affect it. It just means whatever GPA they had before is going to continue through the pass-fail system. I know that.
I comment on that too.
Yeah. But we will continue to work on making sure, and I think that there are, depending on the school system and how many people they've got a hold of, I don't know if there's other things that might be done with respect to grading. But I'll let Mayor Wytoski talk about that.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, I don't know exactly what the university system is going to do long term, but those, it's actually not a pass-fail grade; it's a pass incomplete grade that we're using for the next time. But it's also not just for seniors. That's something we're seeing 6th through 12. The credits, of course, only affect 9 through 12, so those 6th and 7th and 8th graders won't have a transcript issue. But freshmen right now are certainly going to have that pass or incomplete on that transcript. And additionally, it can affect GPA because a pass won't give them an opportunity to raise GPA so for kids who were really close to different lines, either for honors or for qualifying for scholarships, they actually just lost their last opportunity to boost their GPA. So the pass incomplete grading thing will be in effect. It will cause transcript issues for at least 4 years. Additionally, and I didn't hear this from the university system, but it's possible I just missed it. But the state also waives specific requirements for next year's graduating class, such as essential skills and certain testing. And so that will also be something that I, have been at least a little bit concerned about, that university systems, I haven't heard a narrative on that. But there's for sure those major effects for both this year's seniors and next year's seniors, and then some more minor effects on a transcript for the current freshmen and sophomores. But that's also assuming that we get back to business as usual in the fall, and we don't know that that will be the case.
Yeah. But I will guarantee you that since this thing is happening across the nation, that schools will be understanding. So I don't think that's going to be as big an issue. If you're really thinking about getting to one of those elite schools, which we have some of our kids, they've always made exceptions. Just as a high school principal, I will tell you, I had a couple students who went to very Ivy League schools who didn't even graduate from the high school because there was a class they didn't want to take, and it was a requirement, and they checked with their university, and the university didn't care that they had personal finance either. So they just went off and got it. Their parents cared and eventually got in a light class that they took in college and sent back to us so they could get their diploma. But the schools themselves look at the body of work that kids have done, not just including in the schools, but all those volunteer things they do, all the other kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into getting yourself ready to get accepted to those schools. And some of them have essays that you have to write. There's the SAT and the other schools, though those are mostly going away. Lots of opportunities for kids to write, and they like to get those kinds of things. So they will figure this out because they also need to have students coming to their schools. And the truth is they want the kids to come to be successful. So they try to figure out, how does this student match with their abilities and our school so they'll be successful. And I think the bigger part will be teachers in the long run, because teacher recommendations are a really big factor. The local in-state universities actually have a long history of every school in our state and the history that the kids that came from those schools have performed at those schools. And so GPA is even different from one school to another based on past performance of the kids that came from those schools. And they really keep track of a lot of that information to help make sure the kids that they get are successful. So I've always felt that the system will help take care of kids, especially if those kids keep working hard and trying to get the classes done, not have too many incompletes, figure that stuff out. That's really important to all of us and to them.
Great, thank you very much, Senator. Other questions? Really good comments. I've learned a lot from this. So Mayor?
The last comment I wanted to make, I promise I'll get off of the school thing because I could talk about it all day, I know, is just, one narrative that I'm reminding my kids, my students who are very, very stressed out about getting into college, being successful in college, about missing the last thing is, we've used examples like, major natural disasters and talked about, lots of kids who missed an awful lot more school than they are missing during Hurricane Katrina and other major events. They go on to successful careers and productive adulthoods, and it doesn't end up being a large setback. And that, a lot of universities do understand, even when they're more geographical, situations like that, when you explain to universities what's happening and there is a conversation, empathy exists. And they're usually pretty reasonable. So especially considering how broad and shared this experience is, I have tried to talk to my kids about all of the other situations that lots of other kids have suffered in the past and still managed to go to college and have successful careers.
Yep. And I do want to say it has been one of the highlights of being on these meetings is Mayor Wytoski's passion about schools. And I come from that same passion, and it is what makes the difference. And that's why I think our kids are missing being in a classroom, because having people who they know care about them is really an important part of the socialization of our society. And so I want to thank you very much for being the teacher you are.
Yeah, thanks from lots of us on here too. I got a lot of head nods. Oh yeah, so thanks to both of you for that work. I would love to go now, if there are, we can come back to questions that Senator Roblan may want to address, but I'd love to hear from both Commissioner Sterrett and Commissioner Olson what they would like to tell people in the community. And let's start with Commissioner Sterrett.
Hi there. I just wanted to go to one element, and that was the, obviously DHS is on my mind, and there have been concerns that perhaps there are removals based on COVID diagnoses. And what we're finding is that it's only if there's no other fallback for a child to be placed with a family member. So that's not happening wholesale, but it is an element, obviously, of child welfare. So just wanted to throw that out there.
For sure. Thank you, Commissioner Sterrett. Yeah, I saw some emails, and it was really good to get very quick clarification about what's happening with DHS. So yeah, thank you very much. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell people today?
Well, one of the things, I hope you can hear me now, I changed my microphone. Was better. So one of the things today, I'd like everybody to know that isn't aware of, and Senator Roblan could probably weigh in on this, is the PUA program is now in effect, and they're taking applications. And it's been raised in several meetings about what do we do with self-employed contractors, what do we do with a lot of the field workers that really haven't, they've paid into the credit, but they haven't been able to claim unemployment opportunities. Well, that is now in effect. And so for those home businesses, the self-contractors, self-employed, that is now available. It was available as of this morning, I believe it is. And they are taking applications for it. And it lists, the document lists who's available and who isn't. But you can go to, this came from Jody Christensen, and I don't have the link for it right now, but it is available and it is up and running.
That's a really good comment, Commissioner Olson. I earlier today, because I wanted to make sure people knew about it, I typed in Oregon PAN, and it came up. My suggestion was Oregon Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, and there was it was a direct link to the press release, which has a lot of really good information, including who's eligible and how you go about it.
It does. I agree with you. I didn't look it up myself, but because I was on one call this morning, and so I didn't look it up myself. But yes, it is. I think it's very excellent for a lot of our self-contractors and our independent businessmen who otherwise are not entitled to unemployment insurance. So.
Yes, and a good clarification around that too is that it's retroactive. So they actually say retroactive to February 1st or January 31st or something like that through December 26th of 2020.
Right. So that's definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, fantastic. Any questions for Commissioner Olson or comments around the pandemic unemployment assistance?
One thing, Casey, I'd like. Oh.
Sorry, I was just going to share that I'm just going to send the link out to that to all the folks who get this meeting link, and then if you all want to forward it on to your constituents, then you have it directly.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah.
One other thing that I found this morning that was kind of interesting is that, and I hope somebody at the state, Senator Roblan, is actually doing a good job of tracking all the costs of additional additional staff outside of state staff is really tracking machinery, soft time. How much is this costing us? Because I was really surprised the government gave the state of Oregon about almost $100 million for system modernization of their systems. One of the systems that were identified was the unemployment system. And in the fund for that, they're still sitting on about $83 million. So I don't think if we would have had that used friendly and that money would have been used, we wouldn't be in half the situation with unemployment claims we are now. And it'd be interesting to find out just why that hasn't been, in 10 years, hasn't been used.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mute. Now, I can tell you, we've had a big conversation about that at the legislature and at ours. And the big issue is we have had massive failures in IT buys at the state level. And if you watched when we tried to do the thing with our DMV, if you've watched with some of these others, we have not done well. And so the legislature actually put in place a criteria about how you go about getting a vendor and doing it correctly. And employment has been working on that. They say they're close to having that bid process ready to go and a system that can work. The federal government has also been helping with that, but spending money on something that doesn't work is not a good plan. And we probably should have gotten to it sooner, but we haven't. And I have had a lot of people who are in the IT business defend the decision not to buy something bad early. So it turned out we should have done something sooner than we did, but the reality is we didn't want to waste money that came in to try to fix the system and then make it worse. So
thank you, Senator Roblan. My thing is too is I spent 40 years in information technologies myself, and I went through all of the DMV fiasco and everything, and you're correct. You know, part of the problem is exactly what you said. The other problem is agencies, whether it be state, private companies, but mostly in the public sector, buys these systems and then they want to modify the heck out of them. So they to make them fit them, and then it doesn't work. Instead of getting something that 90% works and 10% doesn't work, that 10% will kill you because you'll try to modify the system. So I'm in firm believer, and I'm glad somebody's taking a look at that.
I totally understand, even though I barely know software systems. In my little time at the county, I've seen this a lot, so I know what he's talking about. And I'd also like to welcome Representative Gomberg, who just popped up on the screen. Also wanted to acknowledge that Wendy Valise from Portland General Electric and Mayor Mike Cape from Amity both showed up too. So welcome to all three of you, and thank you for joining us. Oh, and look at the top, look at the bottom. It's a good thing there's a separation on the screen.
I have a Timbers shirt just to try to be neutral.
Way to go, everybody, way to go. Representative Gomberg, I would love to, oh my goodness, there's a dance going on. We have talked about a lot of things today, but one thing in particular we talked about is the pandemic unemployment assistance through the employment department. But what else at the state would you like to update folks on today?
Well, thanks so much, Commissioner. Yes, that's right. I'm taking a gradual return to normal. You're making gestures indicating that my beard has disappeared. So, yes, we're moving back slowly toward normalcy. I've been listening in on the meeting for the last few minutes, haven't been able to actually get in, so thanks for connecting me. But I have certainly heard the Commissioner's remarks that we are now set up to receive applications from people who are self-employed, gig workers, contractors, so that the state can begin to issue them payments based on their claims. And my understanding is that will be retroactive to the period that they qualified, now that we finally got the software properly up and running. I think for most people listening, the frustration remains that we have people waiting for their claims to be processed or waiting for their checks to be cut. Understand that normally it takes about 3 weeks for those checks to arrive. We are now looking at a period where it's taking roughly 5 weeks for those checks to arrive. I will tell you that we've got some great people working on the problem, and that they have added nearly 500 employees from the base of 100 they started with to respond to the flood of applications. But that is no comfort whatsoever to people that are used to living paycheck to paycheck and have now been waiting 3, 4, 5, or 6 weeks to get those important payment envelopes, which is supposed to include not only the base pay, but also the $600 per week. So we've got a cash flow problem. The agency is aware of it. Senator Roblan and I have certainly been putting pressure on the agency directors, their staff, and the governor's office to try and speed this up as best we are able. We're very well aware of the problem.
And my screen, I don't know if Dave is right next to Mayor Cape, but Dave was a OSU student body president when he was at OSU. So just so you know, I was seeing my little corner of OSU down there. So.
Thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate it.
I really liked you a few moments ago, but that just lost me. I married the Oregon marching band drum major.
Oh my goodness. Okay, any other comments for Representative Gomberg? And yes, Joya.
Hi, I'm going to bring it up again, the cat tax. I saw that the governor sent a letter to OBI President Sandra whose last name just escaped me for a second. Anyway, that there would be some relaxation of penalties and things like that. Could you talk briefly about that for us?
Well, yes. There have been there's been some advocacy that the implementation of the cat tax be delayed. I don't think that's going to happen. Some of us have advocated that rather than delay it, that we increase the base amount that requires you to participate in the cat tax. It's currently at 1 million, and we've suggested that be increased to 2 million, and at least give a break to some of our smaller businesses that are in the mix right now. That would require the legislature to come into session, and we don't have yet word on that. The important current information is that if you make a good faith effort to estimate what your tax payments are going to be, that there will be no penalty for underpaying or delaying your payment. You need to check with the Department of Revenue on that, but my understanding is if you are delayed in your payments because of the COVID environment, that you will not pay any penalties for that later payment, and that's significant. I'll remind you again that the cat tax only applies to businesses with more than $1 million of activity. Unfortunately, there's fewer of those in our district than there were a year ago, but the situation continues to evolve.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Other questions for Representative Goldberg? All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks for listening in even before you got on. And now I have your phone number.
So, on the OSU front, have we got 30 seconds for a very quick story?
Yes, as long as we can clap.
All right. Well, the story is this. I was in a meeting of the Ways and Means Committee, and just before we started, one of my colleagues, a Republican woman from Southern Oregon, had a photo album out. She was showing people pictures. And some of the pictures are when she was the homecoming princess at Oregon State University. And I went over and admired the pictures, and I said, this is wonderful. I remember when I was student body president, the most embarrassing thing I had to do was go down onto the field during homecoming at halftime, present flowers to the homecoming princesses, and kiss each of them in front of a full stadium. And she said, well, yeah, I felt exactly the same way. That was horribly embarrassing. When were you student body president? And I said, well, in 1976. And she gets this pale look on her face because she was a princess in 1976. And we realized that some 40 years ago, we'd shared that embarrassing experience in front of 50,000 cheering fans.
Thank you for that 30-second story. I appreciate it.
And just to be more clear about it, I think another student body president from OSU was your other senator from down there, Mr. Senator Boquist.
Well, certainly Brian Clem was a student body president.
And Brian Clem.
I'm sensing a trend here. Okay, well, let us move. Thank you for those stories. I appreciate it. It's also, sometimes I look back at the images of the screen and I see us laughing, and I think this is a global pandemic, but I want to really remind folks out in the audience and all of us here that we all have this humanity together, and we are all in this together. My kids remind me all the time that they get to live through a global pandemic with all of that entails, including the odd stories and the heartbreak of it. So I just want to acknowledge that laughing really is part of this, the whole story. So I would love to go to mayors next, and Mayor Wytoski, I had to choose one, right? I should have flipped. So Mayor Wytoski, what would you like to tell people today, besides that you love the University of Oregon?
Well, I first want to remind everybody that I actually control your video feed, and I can shut it off and change your background all on my own. So you can all be go ducksing your whole afternoon if this keeps up. So I'll offer that reminder to start. This week, one thing that we did was we were really focused on the April 30th deadline to communicate to seniors whether they were done or not. And so a lot of my time was spent with those audits and with those calls, letting kids know what they had remaining. And unfortunately, I farmed out the work of congratulating the kids who were done, and I only had the tough conversations But I did eventually send the email that said congrats to kind of back up that part, and that felt great. So that's been a lot of my focus, has really been following the ODE stuff. In the city of Dayton, you know, things are going about how they have been. I think my residents are, for the most part, you know, very respectful of the orders. Our parks are staying pretty empty. I think people, especially when we have nice weather though, are really, really aching for some outdoor activity, if for no other reason than mental health. So I know I've had a few questions of, you know, what lakes are open, what river access is open, what parks are open. And I'm looking forward to Yamhill County opening the boat ramp again, for example, which has been really heavily used by people who just need to get out on the river. And of course they are, you know, pretty distant from other people. Even if they are on the same river, they're not generally traveling within 6 feet of each other. And also, of course, being really sensitive to the health implications and continuing to protect our vulnerable populations, including those who live near the boat ramp or near the parks, who are nervous about those facilities resuming their regular activity. You know, we've had our receipts for our urban program have gone up a ton. So we are seeing the really positive in that is, of course, our residents are reducing their water bills, and it is also showing us some really good patronizing to our businesses who are really enjoying and appreciating that program. It also is a decrease in our revenue in our water fund, which we are covering with that 30% discretionary fund for our TLT. But we also, of course, expect TLT to kind of tank without those short-term and tourism visitors. So I'm really hopeful that between the state and the federal packages that we do see some relief for cities who are working to be the front line, that first check to support our local businesses and support our residents with, you know, continued support of food banks and meal deliveries and other things like that. So I really hope we do see some relief to cities. I think that story maybe is not being heard where it needs to be. So I hope to have some ears on that so that we don't have cities unable to continue to provide services here in the next 2 years.
Yeah, good points, Commissioner, or Mayor. I was going to say, Commissioners, I believe we are hoping to see a report from our county parks manager, in fact, about county parks and whether there are any that we have the personnel hours to open up. So I think that's a all right. Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Cape, what do you have to tell your community today besides Go Beavers?
Well, that's the most important thing, right? You know, I think the main thing that I want to share is just that, you know, we're continuing to hang in there. There's a new group created by some community members this week on Facebook. And what they're doing is they're asking people, if you can't go buy an item that you normally would get from a business here in town, then instead, you know, make a donation to that business with their Venmo account. And so this is the first week they started that. The Rainflower is a wonderful shop here in town. It flowers and candy store right on Trade Street, and is I love it. Every time I've used them, they create beautiful bouquets that I usually give to my wife and daughter. And so I'm going to be making a donation to them this week as well. Just one of those, I think, a great idea that came about from our community members trying to support the local businesses. And each week they're going to select a different business in town to kind of quote unquote sponsor that week, and ask people, you know, hey, if you got $1 to donate, then donate $1. If you can do $5, then do $5. That'd be great. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity. The one concerning thing that I have is this Saturday I went to Lowe's, you know, to get a couple supplies for some projects around the house, and man, I was just shocked how many people there were walking around without, their face mask. I got mine. I wear it when I go to work all the time. I got it right here at my desk so I can grab it. And I was just amazed. I think there was 3 of us at Lowe's in the Lawn and Garden Center in McMinnville that had a face mask on. And a lot of people just not really following the social distancing guidelines. And so, I hope people continue to understand the importance of that, of those guidelines, the social distancing especially, and get some kind of a bandana or a sock or something. If you need something, to use as a face covering, I think that likely could be one of those key pieces that's going to be required for that phase 2 opening. We looking down the road, and how are we going to fit 35 kids into a classroom and without some kind of a face covering as well? I see that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that as a pretty likely necessary step. So get prepared, get used to them now. My wife and daughter complain about it, but I'm like, hey, it's better than getting sick or getting somebody else sick. So, be smart and do some good things. So I think that's all I got for my report. And unfortunately, I was late because I had one work email or work meeting, and I got another one coming up. So I'm going to have to leave pretty soon, but thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cape. And Representative Gomberg is also modeling for us. So, and I think that you're right, that I think that a lot of businesses, as they open and as preparing to open in their plans, they'll probably be requiring people coming into their stores to be wearing some kind of face covering. So we do need to get used to it. All right, we were going to go to business leaders. And Wendy Valise, can we start with you? What would you like to tell people?
Yes, so one of the things that we're seeing an increase in is scammers or scams. And unfortunately, there's, as much as we're trying to get information out, people, and understandably, will panic if they get a call saying that we're going to turn them off. And so the information that we have is that we are not disconnecting anybody during this time. And we have provided, and I can provide information about in multiple languages about the fact that we are not sending out, calling customers, and they are not going to get their energy disconnected. The other pieces, and PGE's been working really hard, is providing information both for our residential and our commercial customers about calling us to work on payment plans, as well as energy assistant program contacts. So as well as, I had another item on here, as well as energy saving information. So we've developed all the materials in English and Spanish, and I understand now we have another document that's in multiple languages. So again, trying to ensure that we are reaching the most people that we can about ways to contact us, ways to communicate with us, and certainly ways for them not to be taken advantage of during this time.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Wendy. It's good to have that information. And I can totally understand the panic of somebody getting that phone call.
Yeah, that's
and wanting to take action. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joya, would you like to go next as a representative of McMinnville Chamber of Commerce? What would you like to tell business leaders and others?
Sure, thanks. So Oregon State Chamber of Commerce sent out an email today asking people to complete a survey. They're looking for feedback from the Oregon business community on reopening the state. So, it's pretty in-depth survey, and we will be sending that out to our membership. Chemeketa Community College sent out a pretty extensive document with links to fact sheets and things like that regarding the PPP program. So if people have more questions about that. I read a really interesting article on Inc. magazine about how businesses can open safely. So there's lots of great information available out there for businesses and people trying to figure out what steps to do next. And tomorrow we're going to have Jody Christensen present to the chamber the governor's opening plan. So we're excited about hearing more about that, and we've sent that information out to our membership. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Joya. Shannon Buckmaster, what would you like to tell people?
Just a couple quick updates. So yesterday afternoon, we hosted an election forum for the two of the three candidates for Yamhill County Commissioner. Mr. Wall was not responsive to our request to participate, but it was, the video has been released. It's an hour long. It's an opportunity to hear from Lindsay Bershauer and Barbara Boyer. Again, recognizing that there has to be some degree of normalcy that we keep, being attentive to our regular function, what it will look like to reemerge from this. It was, I think, a fantastic conversation that included really relevant economic development aspects or generalized community. And I know some of you were on that forum, so that's free. It's out there. It's released as a playback video on the Chahalem Valley Chamber of Commerce's website and also our social media pages as well. So that was a resource we wanted to share with our community, but it's also relevant to how we're adjusting and how we're planning to move forward. Tonight, the city of Newburgh is looking at adopting their budget with significant revenue cuts, including a big drop in TLT funding, transient lodging tax, right? So that is looking at, I think it's currently at a 50% decrease for our community over the year, just in the last 2 months, and we're expecting overall an 80 to 90% decrease in TLT funding, which affects several areas of our budgeting locally. Certainly affects our DMO. It affects our Chamber of Commerce. We do have a portion of that as our budget, so the city is continuing to make those adjustments. You hear these conversations, they have a ripple effect, right? Same thing this morning, we hear from Travel Oregon that they are letting go of 1/3 of their staff and reducing a lot of their budgeting programs. So it's this crater effect on tourism, hospitality, lodging, and what that looks like to support other things. I mean, even if we look at reopening some sort of leisure-like restaurants or outdoor activities, that doesn't boost TLT revenue. So it's not a sustainable financial process, at least not for the next year, perhaps 2 years. So that's a conversation we're having locally. We are looking at reopening our farmers market in Newburgh. So figuring out what social distancing will be like for our community. And then I do hear that at 2 points during this week, later this afternoon, and then again on Thursday, I'm fortunate to be able to be a set of eyeballs on some of the plans that the governor's office is creating for reopening. So we can review them, give perspective or feedback from the professional community or business community perspective, to make sure that yes, we're being safe, but we're also having an authentic business process that is not inadvertently or exorbitantly burdening our businesses as they reopen. So finding that balance of safety and common sense. That's my update.
Great, thank you very much. Questions for Shannon Buckmaster? Okay, great. I think that you bring up a really good point that with budget committee, we have our budget committee coming up, and we also have our hearings, and we also have to do the dance of how to get everybody on the same page without everybody being in the same room. So we will be doing that in a couple different ways. But along those lines, our county, it looks like maybe seeing, depending upon the department, between a 9% and a 17% decrease in revenues coming into various departments. So we'll have a lot of work to do going forward, especially because we have more uncertainty than certainty. I think is the real lesson in all of this right now. So thank you for that update, Shannon. If we have any more comments, I just have a few things I'll run through, and then we'll wave to everybody. Okay, great. In addition to the budgets coming up, we also have a land use hearing, and we will be conducting that one just by written comments only, which will actually be in line with how most land use remand hearings work. But I just want to acknowledge that that is different than people being able to show up and talk in person. So it will feel different for all of us. We're working, the county is definitely looking at how we can increase testing capacity for diagnostic tests, and having the guidance from the state loosened up is definitely going to help with that, for sure. One of the new things that our public health office is doing is adding a new grid to their daily updates that's cases by a zip code. So you can now look and see the spread across the Yamhill County of where cases are. It's not super exact and super precise, but it does give you a sense that there is a spread rather than just being in one community or one facility. So I think with that, the last thing I want to remind people of is that we are awarding our immediate grants to businesses beginning this week, but checks won't be cut until the middle of May because we have to make legal agreements with every single one of those 100 businesses. So it does take a little bit of a time, and immediate in county government is not actually immediate. And it reminds me of A Princess Bride, where the conspirator, the brains, he always says inconceivable. And his fellow conspirators say, I don't think you know what that means. I think you're using a different word. And in this case, immediate really isn't immediate, but we're helping as fast as we can, and we're moving quickly. So, and with that, I also have had conversations with businesses because they don't know whether out of the 360, whether they're one of the 100 yet. And so I've had requests from community members and business leaders, that they would love a second round to be offered. And so that's just out there, is that there are people requesting that. And I think it's something to consider. So, and with that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, all across the board. I really am grateful to hear your voices and give you the opportunity to speak to the public. So thank you, everybody, and we are all in this together.